And we were talking as well about Charlie Kirk and his role and his attention, and his. I don't know if you know this, but I gave a quote from Charlie Kirk yesterday where he said, "We finally have a president who understands the seven mountains of cultural influence." And so we were speaking into that as well, and of course those who have attacked him, will say even from the church, have attacked him for him being one who promoted the seven mountain thinking, and not understanding that this really all it is the salt and light mandate. It's just a kingdom mandate. But anyway, so in fact, I understand you've had a little bit of interaction with Charlie.
Yeah, I met Charlie in 2020 in January before COVID hit. We're both speaking at the America Renewal Project conference with David Lane. He brought a number of key leaders together, including Charlie and Dennis Prager. I wasn't the main speaker, but I was a speaker there. And before the first session, he introduced me to Charlie. I never met him before. I heard of him. And he said, "I want you to meet this young man." He was 25 years old at that time. And I shook his hand and I heard about him. I was looking forward to hearing him. He was the speaker for the first evening session. And when I was listening to him, I said, "Oh my goodness, this guy is absolutely brilliant." And I thought to myself, he will be president one day, or he could potentially be president of the United States. And it was so good to see a young conservative who loved Jesus. And so we connected that night. And then when I won the lawsuit in 2021, I got a call from Charlie saying that, "I want to invite you to dinner with Jack Hibbs and Rob McCoy, some of my friends here at Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills." And so I made a beeline there. I drove out there and met with them. And he just wanted to hear what happened. I told him about the lawsuit, how I lost in the lower courts, how I had a jail term of 1 year. I was fined $4.5 million for opening up during COVID. And by God's grace, went all the way to Supreme Court on February 5th, 2021. I won 6-3 and received a $1.3 million settlement. And when he heard that, he said, "I want you on my podcast." And then he started to invite me to the Turning Point Faith conferences as a pastor who took a stand. And he said, "I want to come and speak at your church." And my only regret is that we didn't have an opportunity for him to speak at our church or for me to even go to his podcast. We got so busy. And then, of course, as we're running together for this past election, he wanted me to come, on October 23rd, 2024, to pray with 80 other pastors and President Trump. And this was in Atlanta before a big rally. I didn't know I was going to be one of the 4 pastors to lay hands on him to pray.
Amazing.
For him. And so all these open doors through Charlie. And so I am so grateful for him. What a great man of God. And of course, he's looking down from heaven now. And even that picture is somewhat iconic because I didn't organize that picture, that photo shot. It was the photographer. And so he had Charlie and President Trump in the middle and me on the other side. And I totally forgot about that until his assassination. And the Lord reminded me of that picture. I said, "Lord, somehow you brought us together for such a time as this. And now I'm running for governor. And so I'm grateful that I knew Charlie and that President Trump, I had the privilege of meeting him. And President Trump plays a major role in this because when I received a call to run for governor on April 28 on 2:22 in the morning, and that number is very significant because Isaiah 22:22 is going to give you the keys of David. He's going to open doors that no man can close and close doors no man can open. And I didn't hear a voice. I didn't have a dream. It didn't wake me up through a dream, but I had the presence of God wake me up at 2:22. And I knew my spirit I was to run for governor. And I said, my first reaction was, "Lord, please not this. I'll do whatever you want me to do, but don't ask me to run." Because I saw flashing before me the sacrifice of just laying down, being a pastor, laying down Harvest International Ministry, we're now in 73 nations, laying down my time with my grandchildren. I have 10 grandchildren, and the highlight of the week, without exaggeration, is time with my family. And I knew that would have to be sacrificed because it would be a sprint to the June primaries, which is June. So we're only talking about 6 months away when people would decide the top 2 vote getters, and then November 3rd will be the election. And I saw that flashing before me, and I said, Lord, this is impossible in the natural. Please don't ask me to do something. And of course, with God, all things are possible. But then I said in my weakness, I said, Lord, I met President Trump twice in 2024. I met him in Mar-a-Lago in February with Cindy Jacobs, Dutch Sheets, and around a dozen key leaders. And then I met him in October 23rd, the picture that really has almost gone viral. And I said, Lord, if you want me to run, I'm going to throw out a crazy fleece. Have President Trump invite me to the White House, because I've never been to the White House. I mean, I grew up in the nation's capital, so I've never been to the White House, even on a field trip with our elementary school, and so even as a tourist, never been there. And 5 hours later, that morning, that day, I get an invitation. It was an email. I thought it was a spam, Johnny. I thought it was like a fake spam. But as I opened it up, President Trump cordially invites you to the National Day of Prayer at the Rose Garden, to the White House, gave me details of what to bring, my passport, which entrance to walk in because of security. And I said, oh my goodness, you cannot make this up. I threw out a fleece that I thought was just off the charts, and he gave it to me within the same day. And I said, okay, Lord, you got my attention. And that's when I began to run in earnest.
That's just so wonderful, everything you're saying there, Che. I remember if people need to be reminded of the difficulty of being a pastor during those early COVID years, and particularly in the state of California. If it was difficult any other state, just increment that by 10 times. And so you have an idea. I was reading, yes, they were, and I don't know if you just said that or not, you were being threatened not only, I think, a year in jail, but $10,000 a day fine or something ridiculous.
Right.
Was it that kind of a fine, like $10,000 a day or something for being open?
Yeah, it was $1,000 per person per week. We've been meeting. We calculated $4.5 million at that point. It would have been, if I had lost, it would have been millions more. But by God's grace, the Supreme Court picked our case. And by the way, it wasn't just me. I want to just really thank, first of all, Matt Staver, Liberty Counsel, for doing this pro bono. But I asked our HIM churches in California, we have around 145, and I asked if they would be part of the plaintiff, and they said we're all in. So I thank God for the apostolic movement. I thank God for churches that are not woke. And so they gave me their information. So we went in as almost like a class action suit against the lockdown. And I think Supreme Court picked us because it was a number of churches, not one. Not knowing also, Art Hodges with the United Pentecostal Church, a few days later, also sued Governor Newsom for representing his denomination. He had 450 churches as far as UPC churches in California. And he's a bishop, Bishop Art Hodges, a dear friend. And I think together we got the attention of the Supreme Court and said there are churches that are rising up and we need to look at the case. And what really blessed me and shocked me was that John Roberts sided with us, because he doesn't normally side with the conservatives on the bench, but he did this case. Because it was clearly our First Amendment rights, the right to gather to worship, was violated.
Oh, for sure. It was definitely the righteous verdict coming out there on your behalf. But so I want to, applaud you for your stand, your courageousness. I know that has to be what stood out, why Charlie wanted to reach out to you when he heard a pastor stood up, because that was a frustrating thing for him during those years. People think he was just attacked by the left and woke and all that, but he was attacked by pastors all over the place as well for what are you doing being involved in politics, and and he would this is not being involved in politics. This is the call to, well, he said it was his government, it's the ecclesia. He would word it right, but all he said is I'm going to be courageous, I'm going to fight, and the rest of the results are up to the Lord. And so he chose a pathway through the mountain of education, college campuses that seemed, I say it's even more daunting perhaps, or equal daunting to trying to run for governor of California. is because, our generation kind of like, well, we've lost those young 20-year-olders. They have been so programmed. And then the lockdown, what they experienced there. And then Charlie went after him. He had some kind of prophetic assignment and call and fearlessness. And he just like, it's up to God to give good results. I'm going to be courageous. So I see you doing the exact same thing. You leave in the hands of the Lord exactly what it all turns to. But I do sense the Lord all over it in the right way, that you did hear his voice. You're responding to him. And it's one way or the other. It's a good thing that you stood up. It's good for the body of Christ. It's a good example for your whole network. It's a good example to anybody who's watching. And really, in the spirit, I hear it's all up for grabs. So, we might as well have people of right standing with God going for the grabs. Anyway, that's my quick thoughts on it. So
yeah, no, really at the end of the day, for me, I came to California in 1984 because God gave me a dream. A black man appeared to me in the dreams and come to LA for revival. And I now know it's revival and reformation.
Yeah.
Back then, we was just wanting to see souls saved, right, churches blow up and all that, but we realized God wants his kingdom to come on earth as it is in heaven. We've been praying that for 2,000 years, Matthew 6:10, and he's serious about that. And right, so his kingdom is not just over the church or over the family mountain, it's over every sphere. And thank you for being one of the prophets proclaiming that as an apostle, as a prophet. And of course, my mentor, Peter Wagner, taught that, and Lance Wallnau, my friend, and I've been teaching the same message from you guys for the last 20, 25 years. And who would have ever thought God would say, okay, I want you to now be a practitioner. I want you to do it, not just preach it. And so here I am on the government mountain. It was not on my radar. I've been a pastor 46 years. But at the end of the day, we are after revival and reformation in California. And so I feel that we're in the early stages of a third great awakening. It's happening in America. And the signs to me is Trump winning the election, Roe v. Wade being overturned on June 24th, 2022. All these are signs. Charlie Kirk's, even his assassination, what the enemy has meant for evil, God's using it for the good, and we're seeing revival, young people going back to church or going for the first time, Bibles just off the charts, record sales, downloads of worship music. Of course, people are tuning in to Charlie's messages to hear what was this guy all about, and they're getting the gospel and they're giving their hearts to Jesus Christ. Just as a memorial service, and the millions that came to know the Lord through the preaching of the gospel, from Rob McCoy, from the first speaker preaching the gospel.
Right. Amazing.
And then Vance is saying, I'm preaching more about Jesus in my life. And it's just amazing what's happening. So we are in the early stages, and I believe, honestly, me running, calling, God called me. And I believe, my wife said this, she said, this is why we came to California, to see revival and reformation, and that he's prepared me for this. And so it all makes sense. But of course, initially the shock was, and honestly, I'm still in shock that God called me.